reading from the book of Daniel. So the presidents and satraps conspired and came to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an interdict, that whoever prays to anyone, divine or human, for 30 days except to you, O king, shall be thrown into a den of lions. Now, O king, establish the interdict and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore the king Darius signed the document and interdict. Although Daniel knew the document had been signed, he continued to go to his house, which had windows in its upper room open toward Jerusalem, and get down on his knees 3 times a day to pray to his God and praise him, just as he had done previously. The conspirators came and found Daniel praying and seeking mercy before his God. Then they approached the king and said concerning the interdict, "O king, did you not sign an interdict saying that anyone who prays to anyone, divine or human, within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into a den of lions?" The king answered, "The things stand fast according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they responded to the king, "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the interdict you have signed, but he is saying his prayers 3 times a day." When the king heard the charge, he was very much distressed. He was determined to save Daniel. Until the sun went down, he made every effort to rescue him. Then the conspirators came to the king and said to him, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and the Persians that no interdict or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." Then the king gave the command, and Daniel was brought and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you faithfully serve, deliver you." A stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lord, so that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No food was brought him, and sleep fled from him. Then at the break of day, the king got up and hurried to the den of lions. When he came near the den where Daniel was, he cried out anxiously to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you faithfully serve, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Daniel then said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth so that they would not hurt me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no wrong." Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. The king gave a command, and those who had accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. Before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples and nations of every language throughout the whole world, "May you have abundant prosperity. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people shall tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. For he has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." This is the word of the Lord.
Praise be to God.
Today is Christ the King Sunday, and it's one of the strangest days on the church calendar. Atonement doesn't have a history of doing much to celebrate this day, and I understand. After all, what does it really mean today when we say that Christ is King? Pope Pius XI established this festival day, Christ the King Sunday, in 1925, so it's actually pretty recent, in response to the fear that Christ no longer reigned supreme in the West. Less people were going to church, and Christianity's influence was waning. Secularism offered new accounts of what it meant to be human. tremendous technological advancements radically changed how people lived. People put more energy and loyalty into their country and into their politics than into their church and into their faith. All these changes made God feel less significant and church feel less important. Sounds kind of familiar, eh? We're not the first generation to worry about the church's future. And in response to these worries, Pope Pius established one Sunday a year as a reminder that Christ is, in fact, the Lord of all, over our hearts and over our nations. While there's a cynical read here on the Pope's motives, that he wanted to hold on to power and influence over presidents and prime ministers and national rulers, I think it's also important to note that Pope Pius XI set this day up in the wake of World War I, a war caused by rising nationalism that cost millions of lives for national pride and a few hundred yards of land. The Pope worried that the more time we fight for our tribal allegiances, the more time we spend angry with one another, the more time we wish and celebrate harm on those in our rival factions, there is, and I quote the Pope here, no really hopeful prospect of lasting peace. That also sounds kind of familiar, eh? It doesn't have to be this way. Jesus has a different way than all of this anger, all of this violence, all of this desire for revenge, all this factionalism. A better way. God has been offering an alternative to anger and violence long before Christ the King Sunday was established. At the time of Daniel, the rulers of his day conspired to do harm to anyone who pledged allegiance to any king but Darius. Daniel remained loyal to a God that had a better way than all of the anger and the violence and the conspiring of those earthly rulers. Daniel's loyalty to a higher king than King Darius came with consequences. He was thrown into a den of lions. And in this moment, we see what God's reign actually looks like. God's reign doesn't bite back or seek to inflict harm. Rather, when the door is slammed shut on Daniel, God makes a way. God's power doesn't lash out, but it lifts up. God closes the mouths of lions and opens new possibilities when there seemingly are none. And when Daniel is pulled unharmed from the lion's den, King Darius offers one of the most profound statements of faith that encapsulates this Christ the King Sunday. God is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He delivers and rescues. God's rescue didn't end with Daniel. God's rescue brought Christ from the grave. God's reign of rescue continues forever and ever. Christ is king even when it doesn't feel like it. Christ is king even when we see less people in our sanctuary than before COVID or some other past heyday of Christianity in the United States and in the West. Christ is king even when nationalism and anger and resentment continues to rise in our country. Christ is king even when our nation's leaders and our courts leave us disappointed. Christ is king even when we feel powerless and vulnerable. When we declare that Christ is king, we dare to trust that just like God rescued Daniel from the power of lions and God rescued Christ from the power of death, God still rescues today from the powers that defy God and God's reign of peace and mercy and love. Christ is king. Such a simple statement, but a statement that so easily eludes us. Christ saves us, rescues us. So true, but so easy to forget in times like these. Meta Herrick Carlson puts it so well in her book, Speak It Plain. Christ is king. Democracy is not. Christ is king. Big money is not. Christ is king. The status quo is not. Christ is king. The church is not. Christ is king, and I am not. Christ is king. Christ rescues. Better than any sword, any gun, any revenge. Christ reigns. Christ rescues. And Christ will be doing so forever and ever. Amen.